You are watching Wide Field with Vivian Burchill. This is Wide Field.
أطفال فلسطين يعيشون أوضاعاً صعبة تحت الاحتلال الممتد منذ عقود، لكن المعاناة تأخذ طابعاً أكثر تعقيداً بالنسبة للأطفال من ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة. وانطلاقاً من الإيمان الراسخ بأن لكل طفل الحق في الحماية والتعليم النوعي والرعاية الصحية والرفاه الاجتماعي، تأسس مركز الطفل السعيد الفلسطيني لذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة عام 94 كمؤسسة أهلية ذات قاعدة شعبية من قبل مجموعة من المهنيات والمهنيين والمتطوعين المتفانين. يسعى المركز إلى تعزيز رفاه وسلامة الأطفال الصغار ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة في فلسطين عبر اتباع نهج يلبي احتياجاتهم الجسدية والنفسية والذهنية والاجتماعية إلى جانب العمل على تلبية حقوقهم. ويهدف مركز الطفل السعيد الفلسطيني لذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة إلى تعزيز قدرة الأطفال الطبيعية على التأقلم وبناء ثقتهم بنفسهم وإعدادهم من الناحية العقلية والبدنية، بحيث يصبحون أعضاء فاعلين في المجتمع الفلسطيني.
كل إنسان وراه فكرة وبيحاول يطبقها، بيكون في القصة الأولى اللي أثرت فيه أو الثانية. بعد ما رجعت وبلشت أشتغل كطبيبة أطفال بالبلد، حسيت قديش هدول الأولاد مظلومين، الأطفال ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة والأطفال اللي عندهم إعاقة. فكنت كتير أروح على غزة بالانتفاضة الأولى، واشتغلت كتير بمخيمات غزة بالتحديد، وهناك تعلمت قديش الأطفال، قديش الأميات كمان، أمهات هدول الأطفال قديش بيعانوا وقديش ما إلهم خدمات تذكر حتى، فلقيتهم الأقل حظاً بفلسطين. ومن هون بلشت فكرة إنشاء مؤسسة أو مركز يعنى بهدول الأطفال مع زملاء آخرين. وكان في العمل التطوعي بهذيك الفترة كتير ناجح بفلسطين ومنتشر بكل المجالات، بمجال الصحة، الزراعة، التعليم. فكان بعتبره بهذيك الفترة كل اللي كان موجود كعمل تطوعي حركة أكتر منه مؤسسات.
وفرت دكتور جمانة عودة الحاصلة على جائزة نوبل للأطفال ومن خلال مركز الطفل السعيد الفلسطيني لذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة أحدث ما توصلت إليه الرعاية من خدمات تأهيلية مجانية وخدمات تعليمية، إلى جانب الاحتياجات التنموية والنفسية للأطفال. ولم تتوقف عند هذا الحد، فقد ساعد المركز عائلات الأطفال على التخلص من ثقافة العار المرتبطة بالعجز بالنسبة لأطفالهم، والتي تسود في العالم العربي وغالبية الدول النامية. وبفضل الجهود الجبارة، أبرز مركز الطفل الفلسطيني السعيد الاهتمام بقضية الأطفال ذوي الإعاقة في فلسطين، ووضع القضية في مكانها الملائم. وصل عدد المستفيدين من برنامج المركز إلى 39,600 طفل من خلال برامج عدة، منها صعوبة التعلم وبرنامج النطق والسمع، مرورا ببرنامج التدخل النفسي وبرامج تخطيط الدماغ والعلاج الطبيعي، دون إغفال برنامج الزيارات الميدانية والحوادث البيتية وبرنامج تدريب الأمهات والعمل معهن. قصص النجاح التي حققها المركز لا حصر لها، ويكمن سرها جميعها في رسم البسمة على وجه هذه الطفلة وذاك الطفل. فالعمل مع الأطفال يدفعك دوما لاكتشاف المزيد ويحفزك لبذل طاقات أكبر. كطبيبة أطفال وخبيرة في الصحة العامة، أمضت الدكتور جمانة عودة حياتها في مساعدة أطفال فلسطين وذوي الإعاقة منهم على وجه التحديد، هذه الشريحة الأضعف والأكثر تأثراً بتبعات الاحتلال الاجتماعية والاقتصادية.
رسالتي للمامات، للأهل بشكل عام، شكرا كتير للي بتعطوه لأولادكم. شكرا لكم اللي أعطيتونا لنوصل مع سوا هون. لحالنا ما كنا بنقدر نوصل، وهالقد شيء بعطينا إحنا رضا وفرح وحب ما حدا بيقدر يعطينا إياه إلا هدول الأطفال وعائلاتهم. وإن شاء الله نقدر نعطي أكتر إحنا وهاي العائلات. وأهم شيء إنه الأم تآمن بابنها، تآمن فيه، وإنه عنده قدرات بغض النظر 99% عنده إعاقة بس 1% عنده. ونشوف 1% صغير ونشوف الأكثر 99% اللي قديش هذا الطفل ممكن يعطي. فبصراحة بحب أشكر كل شخص كل إنسان أعطى لهاي المؤسسة وساهم ولو مساهمة صغيرة، مش بالضرورة مادية، مساهمة معنوية، مساهمة مهنية لأنه في كتير متطوعين بيجونا، ومساهمة مالية اللي لابد منها. وبعتبر إنه هاي واجب وطني وواجب إنساني وحتى ديني لأي إنسان بيآمن بفكرة الطفل السعيد، وإيصال السعادة لهدول الأطفال اللي انحرموا، فوق إنه هن عندهم إعاقة كمان عايشين لسه تحت احتلال ووضع سياسي سيء واقتصادي سيء. فهاي هي رسالتي لأي إنسان بيآمن بفكرة الطفل السعيد مهما كانت مساهمة.
رغم كل قصص النجاح المجبولة بالاجتهاد والعطاء، إلا أن الطريق ما زال طويلا، ولأن يدا واحدة لا تصفق فلا بد أن تنضم إليها. جنبا إلى جنب يمكننا إحداث الفرق لغد مليء بالقدرات.
Welcome to Whitefield. I'm Vivian Kobsinger-Birchall, your host. My guest is Dr. Jumana Odeh from Palestine, who is here to talk about battling COVID-19 in Palestine, a country without sovereignty. Dr. Odeh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. It's my pleasure.
Dr. Odeh is a highly regarded pediatrician in the Middle East and has built an impressive career in Palestine and worldwide as a medical doctor, public health expert, and leader. She is the director and founder of the Palestinian Happy Child Center, a non-governmental organization in Ramallah that protects and promotes the well-being of children with special needs. She has worked in government hospitals, including a hospital pediatrician at Augusta Victoria Hospital, Jerusalem, and a project manager volunteer for the Union of Palestinian Medical Relief Committees, as well as a well-protected grassroots organization in health. And she's been a team leader at Caritas Baby Hospital in Bethlehem. She has also worked as a consultant with UNICEF and the Palestinian Ministry of Health, leading the national programming to improve the quality of medical care given to Palestinian children, and a series of consultancies with the Save the Children, Swiss Development Corporation, the Australian Red Cross, Oxfam, Norwegian People's Aid, International Development Research of Canada, and International Federation of Health and Human Rights in the Netherlands. She has participated as an expert at hundreds of international workshops, conferences, and numerous evidence-based studies and researches. She's a frequent writer for the IHT and has appeared on as a health expert on local Palestinian televisions, Al Jazeera, Abu Dhabi TV, CNN, Democracy Now, BBC, and Ted Koppel's Nightline. Currently, she's a faculty director for FXB Disability Rights Program at Harvard University and a senior advisor for Shafala Center for Children with Disabilities in Doha, Qatar. I know that I have read quite a comprehensive bio, but tell us about yourself, your country of residence, professional background, and current positions held.
Yeah, I'm Jumana. I'm a mother of two girls, two daughters. One is a doctor at university, and another one, she's an engineer, and I have 3 grandkids. This is me. I call myself a community pediatrician. I chose medicine since I was very little. I knew that I would love to become a doctor and help people. So I believe medicine is my hobby rather than my profession. And something else I'd love to say usually about my career that I learned from maybe illiterate mothers in camps of Gaza and camps of Palestine and elsewhere in the world, because I worked in Pakistan, India, Netherlands, Canada, and many other Arab countries. I learned things that medical school never taught me. And I learned to understand more my community, to understand and feel the pain of my people. So this is me. This is Jumana. I live in Palestine, in Jerusalem. I was born in Jerusalem, raised up in Ramallah. And the center, the Happy Child Center, was a dream for me. And it happened. It became true in 1994. With other professionals, we started a new initiative and a small initiative, which became a world winner, actually. We got lots of awards, including Nobel Prize for Children from World of Children, Humanitarian Hero of the Year from Brussels, and Takrim from Dubai. So several awards, and mainly because we work with the most vulnerable kids in the area in Palestine, who are the children with disabilities. Where is Palestine? Maybe we'll show later a map, but I can summarize the history of Palestine in a very, very simple words for everybody to understand. My grandparents and parents were born in a small village called Lifta next to Jerusalem. But in 1994, after Balfour Declaration, Israel was created, but it wasn't created in an empty land. My grandparents were living there. They were uprooted to become refugees in Ramallah. But their hometown or village is still there, Lifta. And later they became refugees in the West Bank. The West Bank, called West Bank because it's in the west of Jordan River. When we show the map, it will be clearer. And after 67, there was another war between Israel and the Arab countries, and the rest of Palestine, which is the West Bank and Gaza, were annexed to Israel. Now we live in a Swiss cheese state, we can call it. And if you want to move from one place to another, there are lots of checkpoints. You have to show your documents. Sometimes you are not allowed to go from one place to another. So it is really very difficult to live. We still live under occupation, I believe. I still believe that because we live in a country with no sovereignty. There is Palestinian Authority, including the president, the Palestinian president. If he wants to move from one place, even if he wants to go to the mass in Bethlehem, in the Nativity Church in Bethlehem, in Christmas, he has to get a permit to cross through Jerusalem. So again, we live in a country with no sovereignty. And it's difficult to understand, but this is exactly what happened. But usually I like to say that although my grandparents and parents raised me to forgive, but never to forget that this is the history, this is my narrative. And to make it much more simple, if I come to you, tell you I would like to take your house, or I just take your house, would you allow me to do so? This is exactly what happened to the Palestinians in a simple way. So this is Palestine, this is me, this is where I live. I traveled almost all over the world. I worked in many countries, developmental and developed countries. Up till now, I work in some other Arab countries, but I'm a fish, and I can live only in Palestine. If I go live elsewhere, I die.
COVID-19 has impacted the world in various degrees, in varying degrees. And the United States alone has lost more than 450,000 people today. However, much of the world does not share the experience of battling this pandemic in a country without sovereignty like Palestine. So what is it like battling COVID-19 in Palestine?
Sorry to say, and I'm very sad for all the losses that we have all over the world, including United States and Palestine. In fact, on top of all what we had before COVID, like COVID-19, the restriction movement to move from one place to another, poverty, unemployment, especially if I have to talk about my kids, the kids with disabilities, also it's more burden on parents and on the whole society. So the problem is becoming wider, more difficult, like elsewhere. And the big challenge was with unemployment, that people don't have, for the first time, maybe, I mean, in the last 20 years, that people don't have food even in some places. Also, because everybody was panicked, we didn't know what to do, like elsewhere in the world, about, I mean, to educate people and raise the consciousness for them about wearing the masks, about distancing. It took a while. I remember up to recently, till last summer, we used to have wedding parties with 200 people or 300 people, and people didn't realize that this is very dangerous. So it took a while for the Palestinian Authority, for the civil society in Palestine to advocate for the what we have to do in order to protect ourselves from COVID-19. Nowadays, the numbers are up and down, but for a country like ours, very small country, we are losing 10 people, sometimes 10 people a week, sometimes more, and every day we have about 300, sometimes up to 1,000 people infected. Hopefully, with the vaccination, we'll see what will happen. But up to the last week, we were not. The Palestinians could not get any vaccine, although it is the responsibility of Israel by Geneva Convention to give the vaccine for all Palestinians, because, we breathe the same air and we live in the same land next to each other. Epidemiologically speaking, Israel has to allow us to get our vaccine. So they just, from last week, they just started giving the Palestinian through the WHO and UNICEF and international community. And I believe this is because under the pressure of international community and civil society, which is very strong in Palestine, that Israel was obliged to give the vaccines to the Palestinian or allow them to get the vaccine. So hopefully our Minister of Health just got, she's a friend of mine, a colleague and friend, Dr. Michaela, she just got the vaccine last week, and many other frontline workers we started with doctors and other people to get the vaccine.
Yeah, which is a question I was going to ask you about the accessibility of vaccines in your country. I recognize that Israel has a huge population has been vaccinated, and they are bound by some international treaties. You just mentioned the Geneva Convention to provide vaccines to the Palestinian community. Are there other international treaties that bind Israel to be more proactive in terms of healthcare access for Palestinians?
In fact, yes, Oslo agreement bind Israel that because we still have no sovereignty, we have no access to the world without permission of Israel. Therefore, it is their responsibility. Again, we live in the same demographical area. They are about 200 workers going to Israel every day from the Palestinian territories to Israel. There are lots of communication between East and West Jerusalem. So it's for the benefit of Israel that the Palestinians are supposed to get the vaccines and get vaccinated. In fact, I believe because of the international pressure and the pressure from this civil society, Palestinian civil society, which is very strong in Palestine, Israel accepted to give or to allow them. They are not giving it as a gift for the Palestinians. It's our rights to get it. This is one. Two, we get it through WHO and UNICEF, international community. Israel is not paying for the vaccine, but although they are obliged to. So hopefully, and thanks to the international community and the Palestinian people who resisted and called for their rights to get the vaccine. So yes, they just started. They just started last week.
Well, that's excellent news.
Yeah, it's good news, yes.
Yeah, and to our viewers, Dr. Odeh, one of her accomplishments is she persuaded the Palestinian Ministry of Health to establish a countrywide screening program for the early detection of childhood disorders, including autism, the first program of its kind in the Middle East, and supervised the training of over 650 health professionals for this pilot effort. We'll show you a short video of kids in this center just for you to get a feel for what it's like or what this program is like for these Palestinian children.
شهد انولدت ما بتسمع. طبعا تأكدنا من هذا الحكي كان عمرها شهرين لما عملنا لها فحص دماغي للسمع.
سياسة مركز الطفل السعيد إنه كل طفل وطفلة لهم الحق في العلاج والتأهيل، وممنوع يكون الفقر سبب إنهم ما يتلقوا هاي الخدمة. بعتبرها مسؤولية شخصية كطبيبة إنه الخدمة المجانية لمن لا يمتلك المال. كطبيبة فلسطينية وبعيش تحت الاحتلال، كان دائما همي إني أعمل شيء أخدم فيه بلدي وأحمي أطفال بلدي، وخصوصا إنه أجيال كاملة ولدت تحت الاحتلال. إيش ممكن أعمل في ظروف فقر واحتلال وحواجز؟ حسيت إنه أكثر الأطفال ظلماً هم الأطفال المعاقين، فقررت أمشي هذا الطريق بألمه وأمله.
القدر جمعنا في الدكتورة جمانة، كانت بدها 5 أطفال لتعمل عمليات قوقعة في قطر، من ضمنهم كانت شهد.
في كثير من الأطفال بيجوا على المركز في طفولتهم، يعني أعمارهم 3-4 سنين، هلأ كبروا صاروا 20-25 سنة، جزء منهم بيقدر يشتغل وبيعتمد على حاله. هذا بالنسبة لنا بشكل فخر وهو فرح وأمل. لما بلشنا في الطفل السعيد لفت نظري منظر ما عمري بنساه، جد ماسك ايد حفيدته اللي عندها متلازمة داون وعمرها 3 سنين وجاي يسجلها بالروضة، قال للمديرة من حقها تتعلم وتلعب وتفرح زي باقي البنات.
هلا الفترة البنت اللي عاشتها في الطفل السعيد تقريبا كانت 5 سنوات، كانت فترة حلوة، قديش تعرفت على ناس مثل وضع بنتي، مثل أحسن، مثل أسوأ.
ما اعتمدنا على نموذج جاهز في التعامل مع هاي الفئة من الأطفال، بنينا كفريق نموذج بيشبهنا وبيشبه هدول الأطفال، نموذج مبني على الاحترام والتقبل، تقبل الآخر وبنفس الوقت تقبل هؤلاء الأطفال من ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة. عندي قصة بتختصر تاريخنا. قصة أب كان يبيع كتب على الحواجز وكنت أشتري منه كتب. في يوم لقيته عندنا في المركز، طلب يجيب بنته اللي عندها صعوبة في النطق لأنها انخلقت بشفة أرنبية. البنت الكبيرة هلأ توجيهي وحابة تكمل دراستها ورح ندعمها.
لسه أنا ما بنسى، يعني أول كلمة سمعتها، أول كلمة حكتها كانت فرحة مش بس لإلي، للجميع. كل الشكر للدكتورة جمالة والشكر موصول للعاملات اللي فيه. شهد حالياً طفلة صار عمرها 14 سنة، ما بتفرقيها عن أي طفل عادي.
So to Dr. Odeh, you have this special demography that you work with, who are children with disabilities. So how has COVID-19 impacted these children and their families?
Yeah, in fact, it's a big challenge for Palestinian disabled children to live under occupation, under poverty, and with the COVID-19 and epidemics. It's a big challenge. Mother, I can tell about our experience in our center, the Happy Child Center, that lots of kids can't reach because of the COVID-19. Also, not everybody has internet. It's very expensive. Not everybody has a tablet or a computer for distant learning. And it is a really big challenge. Because of poverty also, some of them, they can't pay for their transportation. A Happy Child, I can tell some stories of our kids that some mothers used to call that we can't reach, so, and my child needs the session, because, we give kids sessions like, rehabilitation sessions, and we explain everything to moms. Moms do the same at home, and we do home visits. All that was disrupted by the endemic. And some of them, because of they can't pay for the transportation, some of them because there are lots of children at home and no schooling and distance schooling. It's not done in Palestine, except maybe 10-15% of the population can do that. And the challenges are huge for moms. One positive thing that mothers told us about, that for the first time in their lives, they felt a bit of a relief, because they the family have to be together and they are not allowed to leave. Fathers were around. And for the first time, fathers felt how difficult it is to raise a child with developmental disability, including autism, especially autism, and they became closer to each other. And the mom said that his siblings understand much more what does it mean to stay all day and night for so many hours together, for many days together. They could feel the suffering of the moms. So this is something painful yet positive, that people get to understand each other much better. Of course, on the other hand, the challenges are huge for parents and mother. What did Happy Child do? We are doing more outreach. When the child, we did lots of packages, home packages that the child can take, and the parents can give the training for their kids. But again, it is a very big challenges, and we wish one day that our kids can come back freely like before. We went through these experiences before when there were lots of checkpoints and kids couldn't reach us. It's very similar, but at that time it was man-made, and this time we don't know, it is the virus. Yeah. So yes, that was because of the Israeli restrictions on movement. But those days, especially during the first Intifada and second Intifada, but now it is because of COVID-19.
Not many people understand the geography and politics of Palestine, or the de jure and de facto nature of it. Could you please explain this Palestine to us?
As I mentioned before, actually, Palestine, it lies on the Eastern Mediterranean region. And people know Israel more because Palestine, historically, it was a Palestinian land, or Palestine. And then when Israel was created in 1948, people know Israel more. So if you say Israel, people will know where is Palestine and Israel. And as I said, there were two wars that Israel annexed more of Palestinian lands, but these lands were not empty. They were people. They were Palestinian people who became refugees. And now in Gaza and the West Bank, there are about 4.9 million people living there, 1.9 in Gaza Strip and 3 million people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But to connect between West Bank and Gaza, we have to go through Israel. So that's why there are restrictions in movement. Therefore, we have almost two governments, one in the West Bank, one in Gaza. Again, this is something very difficult for the Palestinians to survive and live. Our country is poor. It's very poor, and unemployment is a real challenge for Palestinians. Education is very well. Palestinian people are very well educated. We are the second Arab country after Qatar in literacy. Qatar is about 97.8% the literacy level, and in Palestine we are 96.7%. We are, because Palestinians lost almost everything. I remember my grandfather telling me that education. He wanted to educate, and especially women and girls. They wanted to, they really educate everyone, because it's an investment for Palestinians. If you lose everything, you have almost no hope. But again, another thing I would love to say about Palestinian people, that no matter what's happening, no matter how many catastrophes, how many difficulties that we face, we still live, celebrate birthdays, celebrate weddings, get to work. With poverty and unemployment, still people are, they want to live in peace and dignity.
What steps would you recommend that the international community take to address these very specific challenges that your country, and more specifically, the children with disabilities are facing during this pandemic?
Yeah, there is a big responsibility for all international community. Palestinians can't hold their lives under poverty and under occupation. The occupation is supposed to be over. I mean, the Palestinians have the right to become an independent state, and Palestinian children deserve to live in peace and dignity. And the poverty is supposed to be, I mean, if the Palestinians are allowed to work and freely to work and build up their independent state, and this is the responsibility of international community to reach up to that stage, then the Palestinians will find their ways. Till that moment, the international community is obliged to pay the Palestinians all the money they need in order not to live in this poverty and unemployment, and create jobs for the Palestinians under occupation, and to fight against COVID-19 with all means.
In what ways have you tried to harness the international collaboration to help children back in Palestine as Dr. Odeh?
Yeah, actually, I used to, if I talk about the Happy Child, our family at the Happy Child, we do lots of outreach to international community with stories, mother stories, and children's stories of what does it mean to have a child with disability and go through 3 or 4 checkpoints with the turnstiles, the bars in the turns when you have to go with a disabled child, and go through all that in order to reach the center or the rehab center, or to come for any service for the children, education or rehab, or treatment or medical treatment. So it is. This is something we've been doing. We also call upon all international offices and community in Palestine, like WHO, UNICEF, UNDP, UN agencies, and other NGOs, international NGOs. We try to reach out to them to explain what's going on, and we have lots of support from all over. In fact, we have here in the United States friends of Palestinian Happy Child Center who sometimes donate in kind or in mind for the children of Palestine, and also they try to educate people around them about the problem of Palestinian people in a simple way, non-political as much as possible, because it is a human issue rather than any political issue. And it is a right issue. It's the right of disabled kids in Palestine to live, to get their treatment, their services as elsewhere in the world. I will never forget that my parents, this is my narrative, that my parents and grandparents were uprooted from their homeland, Lifta, and became refugees. Hopefully, my grandfather was a very rich guy, very rich man in Lifta, but he became a refugee. He could afford not to live in a refugee camp, but we lived very close to a refugee camp. And I used to play with the refugees, Palestinians in the camp when I was little. And also, when I became a doctor, I served voluntarily in camps in Gaza, the Gaza camps, for years. I've been going as a volunteer every Saturday. I drive my car, go spend the whole day there, and sometimes I will spend weeks in Gaza helping my people and the children in the camps, especially children with disabilities. And even up till now, I feel that I believe I am a third generation, refugee generation, like my grandparents, my parents, and myself. I still consider myself as a refugee. And up till this time, I feel with any refugee, wherever I see them or read about them or watch TV, even we are trying to help refugees, Syrian refugees in the northern part of Jordan. There's a camp, there's Zatari camp. We are trying to help in cooperation with Jordanian Ministry of Health to help children with disabilities in that area, in that camp. There are about 78,000 people living in this refugee camp.
So this is another area of yours that you're really working with, the refugees. And that, in a way, from your story, is driven by the fact that you were a refugee, or you lived in a refugee camp, and you're going back to the refugee camps to give back as a physician. And what is that like, especially for generations? You know, people. You mentioned third generation refugee. What is that like?
You know, in the camps, they don't have running water. They don't have sewage system. They don't have proper housing. They have tents. They don't have enough food. They don't have, the basics. They don't have the basics. Up till this, in the 21st century, they don't have running water.
And then with COVID-19, that requires people to wash hands.
And crowdedness. You know that Gaza is the most crowded area on earth after Hong Kong. So it is the crowding, poverty, crowding. So if somebody's sick, everybody is sick. So it's very, so to follow any hygienic ways, you can't. With no water, with the crowdiness, with poverty, with no food. It's almost impossible to live.
What are the main languages used in these refugee camps? And do people all speak the same language?
All Arabs speak Arabic language, but they are different dialects, but we understand each other.
Okay.
Yes. Well, so we speak mainly Arabic.
And are there very specific strategies for helping refugees during this pandemic? Any intervention?
Jordanian government is doing so in refugee camps, like in Syrian refugee camps in northern Jordan, and it is also in cooperation with the international community. But I feel sorry, for the Jordanian government because it's not easy to take care of all these refugees, and right. I hope that they get enough support from international community. So it is the duty of the international community, and there are lots of refugees now also, and poor people in Yemen, Syria, Iraq. There are lots of wars in the Arab world going on, and as Palestinians who suffered the wars, I feel so sorry for those guys. I wish that we can do any help or support to support these kids. And when I watch the news, sometimes I look for my kids. Where are the kids with autism? Could they could they move from one place to another? I feel so sad and bad for those kids. And sometimes I can't find them. Then once I heard in the news, a mother saying that all my family, a Syrian mother, saying that all my family left, but I have to stay because I have a child with autism. Then another neighbor said that all my neighbors left their disabled kids with me to take care of them, and they left to Lebanon or elsewhere. So yes, the most, who suffers most in these wars? Mainly kids, and kids with disabilities even worse. So this is the burden put on mothers and kids with disabilities.
Yeah, and I feel like COVID-19 is another war. But yes, just a viral war that
catastrophe. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much again for sharing your perspective. It is very rich. Gives us an insight into the Middle East. As an individual, when we talk about the Palestinian-Israel relationship, it's very complex. And this has been a conversation for years and years. We've had different interveners. We've had President George Bush sitting with Ariel Sharon and Mahmoud Abbas, trying to really make it work. So, but still, Palestine is not getting its independence from Israel. So, in your opinion, what are some of the challenges, the things that are in place that are stopping this from happening?
In a simple way, as much as I can, I will say, as a civilian, as Palestinian independent thinker, I believe me as Jumana, I'm a freedom fighter for my people, for my kids to live in peace and dignity, and we need a just peace. Is Israel ready for a just peace for the Palestinian to live next to Israel, to create their independent state next to Israel and live in peace? And the Israeli kids' peace is my freedom, my kids' freedom. So it is for both nations. I have Israeli friends who have the same opinion as mine, that yes, it is our right to live independently as Palestinians. It's very complicated, it's very complex. The politicians don't want to do that. And I have, meanwhile, till they get to a solution, we work hard with our kids, with our community, with our children with disability to live a nicer life. And if it comes to me as a mom, usually I say tears of all mothers are equally salty. This is a Polish pediatrician said it during the World War II. So again, the tears of Palestinian and Israeli mothers are equally salty. One day, I wish and I hope that we will have our independent state next to Israel and live in peace and dignity for both sides, for both generation to come, and for both kids.
What are some of the lessons learned from this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how are these lessons going to better prepare you and other, to prepare you as a doctor for other potential epidemics and pandemics?
Yeah. As a physician living under occupation for so many years, I never ever leave my home without thinking of plan A, B, C, and D. For COVID-19, we were not prepared, no one on earth, and we became paralyzed. So not plan B or C or D worked. So the lesson learned that it became it's a challenge for the whole world. The whole world became paralyzed, but a somehow painful good lesson I learned that epidemics and viruses have no borders, and all we can suffer if we don't work for each other and for the humanity at large. We became a global village. If I'm in pain, you're in pain, the whole world in pain.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you, Vivian.
And,
thanks, and I wish you all the best in your program and in your life.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Odeh. And I look forward to hosting you again to talk about, other things happening at the center, give us updates on the center.
Sure.
And hopefully someday I can come to Palestine and just...
My pleasure. Will be our guest. Our pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
And anybody else would love to visit our center, we are more than welcome.
All right. Well, for our viewers, thank you for watching Whitefield. Till next time.